Hey everybody, welcome to one of my favorite episodes actually, Joni, that I've recorded of the Quite Frankly podcast. And I really created this show in order to selfishly meet the people that I like, that I personally watch online. I'm like, hey, I've got a show. That's an excuse to be friends with them. And Joni's one of those people. Her YouTube videos have really impacted my life. From knowing what to expect this month, how my signs and the stars relate to each other. It's just mind-boggling. And we really went deep into this episode, right? Especially about 2024 and what you can expect and how it might affect you and the world.
Yes. So I'm so grateful that you're bringing this to the attention of the public and that we can enlighten so many more people through the science of astrology and of course with your healing work.
Thank you, Joni. Yes, and we also have a video that we recorded on Joni's YouTube channel, which I will link below. And in that one, we go deep into kind of more my work and the energy healing that I do. But I just want to add really fast that this is going to be, because we shot so many incredible things and I couldn't fit it all into one episode. Tomorrow, there will be a bonus episode where you can see what it's like to have just a glimpse into what a reading with Joni would be like, because she does a reading with me and it's only scratching the surface of how deep you can go.
It's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So that was a joy to read for you and for everybody to get a little taste of what it's all about.
Thank you, Joni. And you guys enjoy the episode. I'm excited to really get into what's going to happen in 2024.
All right.
But of course, we'll talk about first so people can understand the kind of astrology you do.
Yeah, so what I do is called Vedic astrology. And the reason why it's called Vedic is because it originated from the Vedas. It's the oldest form of astrology, comes from the Vedas. And in the Vedas, they talk about the nakshatras, which is such a huge part of Vedic astrology. But Vedic astrology is simply Indian astrology that dates way back. And the big difference between Vedic and Western is that they take into account precession of the equinoxes, which has been happening, is always happening. The planets in their relationship to the stars is continually shifting. And by this time, the Western tropical astrology placements are off by almost a full sign, and it continues to move. So essentially, this is precession. It takes 26,000 years to complete an entire cycle. But the stars are actually moving very slowly, 1 degree every 72 years, but they're shifting backwards. And from 2,000 years ago, the zodiacs lined up, the tropical and the sidereal.
Right.
So Vedic uses the sidereal system, which is the true placements according to the stars, because they've shifted and the Western placements are actually off by almost 24 degrees. So there's 30 degrees to each sign. So you're going to find that in your Vedic chart, your signs change. And that's shocking to most people, especially people that are so attached to their sun signs.
That's exactly what Jade said to me. He was like, people are like, I'm a Taurus, and it is a part of your identity. And then all of a sudden, you realize, actually, I'm in Aries.
Right. I know. You fall back into Aries, your sun sign.
Yeah.
But of course, we're talking about the whole horoscope, and that encompasses all of the planets, not just your sun. So that's your horoscope, which is your chart of where all the planets were at your day, time, and place of birth. It is your life map. And these stars really give reference to the planets. So in other words, the constellations are somewhat like, not completely, but somewhat like the signs, the constellations, the groupings of stars. And as this whole grouping moves, then the placement of the planets are actually relative to a different backdrop of the stars, which pretty much constitutes the signs. So there's the 12 signs and there's the planets. And in astrology, we look at the houses. So I'm talking about the whole horoscope. The houses are everything to me in astrology because they are the framework of your life. such as your home, your family versus your career, your job, your personal relationships versus you personally. So each one of these 12 houses constitutes an area of your life. And as you look at a horoscope, you put all the planets in these houses, and it is really your life map. And one thing I want to get into with you is everyone hears a Vedic astrologer talk so much about Rahu and Ketu.
Yes, yeah, which is in your book here.
Right.
For people who are like watching this on camera, not just listening, they'll see I'm carrying your book. And I was so shocked to see that you have a whole book on it.
Yes.
Because I keep hearing this.
So important.
Why do we keep, first of all, are these planets, Rahu and Ketu?
Let me
what
explain.
are they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I always hear Vedic astrologers talking about Rahu and Ketu.
So Rahu is actually the north node of the moon in Western tropical astrology, and Ketu is the south node of the moon. And what they are is they're not even planets, although we call them planets, but they are actually the points in space where the moon hits the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun from our vantage point, looking at the path of the sun, the ecliptic. Where the moon hits that ecliptic going in an upward motion is Rahu. And Rahu is essentially the north node, is what brings us into the world and really does deal with our karmas as to what we come into, our destiny for our future. And then when the moon hits the ecliptic in its downward cycle, exactly opposite from Rahu, is what takes us out of this world. And Ketu is like the past, but it's our spirituality, whereas Rahu is our desire into this world that makes it the material world, but Ketu is otherworldly. So these 2 points in space, when the sun and the moon align with these 2 points in spaces, that's when we have eclipses. And eclipses, all the ancients from all ancient civilizations were able to depict eclipses because they knew the lineup of the sun, the moon, and the earth. And that is really the relationship of what Rahu Ketu is. So consider this, how important the sun, the moon, and the earth are. That's everything, right? Because the sun is what gives us light. The sun is the male, masculine principle. It's the daytime, whereas the moon is the feminine, female principle. So you have that duality of both the sun and the moon. It's called the duality, really, of this planet. Everything is opposite, right? And that's what this all goes down to. But you know, the ancients, the Mayans, they were able to depict when the eclipses occurred because they knew about the essentially Rahu and Ketu. And what I love about this, the very most, is when you look at where Rahu is in someone's horoscope, their chart, it tells them what their destiny is.
Rahu does?
Yes.
Wow.
What's your future? What you came here to do in this lifetime. And Ketu is what you've accomplished before. Wow. And it will tell you about your gifts and your talents. And I love that it's really about our ultimate karmic destiny in this world. And so many people really want to know why they're here. What is my purpose? What is my destiny? And that's what I find is so relative in Vedic astrology by knowing where Rahu and Ketu are in the chart. And we could go into some great depth. There's even divisional charts that tell you what you're going to achieve in the second part of life and what you're here to do in the first part of life.
So with Rahu, when somebody comes to you, are you able to look at their chart and say, your destiny is this?
Yes.
Wow.
Absolutely. And that is so relative and important. Think of so many people, they don't know what their purpose is. And they struggle with that their whole life.
Or if they do know, like I know, but I still want, I'm like, I want that confirmation.
Well, absolutely. Everybody wants that confirmation. But not only that, I mean, astrology is like our guidance. It's our map as to when things will happen. And I'll tell you one thing that's great about astrology is when somebody's going through a really difficult time in their life, To be able to tell them when that's going to be over gives them so much peace. Because when you're struggling, you say, okay, just 6 more months, I promise you, things will get better. They can get through the dark night of the soul.
Such a good point.
It's all cyclic, and that's what astrology is. It's the energies, and you know everything is energy, vibration, and frequency, everything. And this is what the planets tell us. And they give us all the signs, the symbols, the information that we need for guidance in our life.
It's not like I'm going to a psychic when I go to an astrologer. It's like I'm understanding mathematically or scientifically, because astrology, when it's done the way you do it, is a science.
Right.
And to know, okay, this is what's happening in the planets. Like to think really that the moon can have this effect on the ocean, but is not affecting me and the little water in my body is insanity. Of course it is.
Yeah.
So for me to just come to someone like you once a year and or however often, it just paints a picture of such clarity.
It does. It does. And it gives people a sense of just being in alignment. Because, you know, sometimes we just feel out of balance. And when you understand your alignment and what you're supposed to be doing, when you're supposed to be doing it, and what your gifts and your talents are, and what your destiny and purpose is, it makes life really a joy to live. It does.
And what's so cool about you told me this last night, is you were like 7 years old when you had this whole story happen, right? Where that really showed you the power of astrology. Can you tell me that?
Yes. I've been into astrology ever since I was a child. And of course, my mother had all the astrology books around the house too, so that helped a lot. And we were the same sun sign in Western astrology. So I started reading the books very young. But now I'm from Dallas. And my mother loved President Kennedy. And it was 1963, and she went to the airport to greet him as he came off the plane. Now we know what happened in 1963, but it was the night before that I was watching our black and white TV. I think I was about in 1st or 2nd grade. And a woman, I'm serious, came on and begged Kennedy not to go to Dallas.
Wow.
And she pretty much said, if you do, you will be assassinated. Of course, I don't think she used those exact words, but she did. And I'll never forget it. Her name was Jean Dixon. And she was a psychic astrologer. As a matter of fact, many of the presidents used her.
Really?
Yes. There's many pictures of her in the White House. One I have with her shaking hands with Nixon. So she begged him. Obviously, Kennedy didn't listen. And the unthinkable happened. My mother shook his hand, took pictures of him. I have all the photos.
Whoa.
And 20 minutes later, we know what happened. And from that day, I said, I have to figure out how this woman knew that. And so I studied astrology throughout my teenage years, found a teacher, started doing charts.
You lived this.
Yes, I lived it. And that's one thing I want to say too about astrology. When you've been practicing and doing astrology as long as I have, when you see certain cycles coming up and you contemplate, is it going to mean this or this? Well, when you live it, you know. So I say all the transits, all the dashas, the cycles, pretty much I've lived a lot of them. So I know exactly not only what it's like reading about it, but feeling it, knowing what these cycles produce from real life experience makes a big difference.
Another person is Carnegie, who I love this quote that he said, millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do.
That's correct. And one thing about Carnegie that a lot of people don't realize is he had an astrologer, Evangeline Adams, and she warned him and told him not to go on the Titanic. Wow. And he listened.
Wow.
And so he had the utmost respect for astrology after that.
Oh, it was that moment that kind of made him a believer?
Well, I mean, he was going to an astrologer before, but imagine that. If you heeded the warnings of an astrologer and it saved your life, I mean, you've got to have a lot more respect for it.
Oh, for sure. So what kind of stories do you have maybe around things like that? Where have you told somebody before, hey, don't do this?
Oh my God, so many. I have so many stories. Let me see if I can think of one that's personal. Well, it was in 2004, and I noticed where Rahu and Ketu went in my chart. And it was covering my sun, for one thing. The sun is your life force, and it's also your father. And the fourth house, which is very much family. But to make a long story short, that year both of my parents died in 2004.
Wow.
And you see, Rahu and Ketu have a cycle of 18 and a half years. So this is kind of cute because my youngest son used to get me to come to his school to teach the high schoolers about astrology.
Really?
Yes.
Whoa.
And it was even a Christian school.
In Texas. Yeah, I love
Yes.
this.
So it was the psychology course that I would go talk to the school. And of course I wasn't going to start talking all this terminology. So I just told them in terms of cycles. And I said, there is this cycle that happens every 18 and a half years. And it means every 18 and a half years, your whole life will change dramatically, because that's how long it takes for those nodal axes, Rahu and Ketu, to go through all 12 signs. So they return to where they were. And so the reason why I'm bringing up the children is they were 18. They were getting ready to go off to college. And I said, and right now, this is that 18 and a half year cycle. How old are you? And of course, they're all 18. And I said, you're getting ready to go into the biggest change of your entire life. Leaving home, going away to college.
Yeah.
That's how huge that cycle is. And then 18 and a half years later, you're about 36, 37 years old, there's another big life change. So you can see what we're really talking about is cycles. So these patterns of how long it takes for planets to go through all 12 signs and to return back to where they were when you were born. Such as you've heard of the Saturn return, right? So that's Saturn takes 28 to 30 years to go through all 12 signs of the zodiac and return back to where it was when you were born. And what is Saturn? Growing up, starting to be mature, have a family. What happens when you're 28 to 30? You know? So these are all the cycles. And of course, they're all numerical, all dealing with numbers, cycles, vibrations, timing. That's what astrology is all about, timing.
So speaking of timing, how is 2024 looking for all of us?
Okay. I think this is going to be a very exciting year. And I know everybody hears me say healing, healing, healing. It is a year of healing.
Oh, good.
Yes. And that's, what you're all about.
That's all I do.
I know.
So does that mean more people will be looking for healing?
Yes, on all levels. And as well as I do, healing isn't just the physical body. It's, it's our mind, it's our emotions, right? All of that. It's holistic healing, taking into account. People are starting to realize that in order to heal the body, you've got to heal the mind, the emotions, and that's so much a part of who we are and what we're here for. We're all here to heal. We're here to heal our lives, to heal and to realize what it is that keeps us coming back here over and over and over again, because, and I love Vedic astrology because of course it takes into account reincarnation. It's from India. And why else do we have the lives we have if it hadn't been predetermined by something, and something that we're all about? We're not victims. We are the co-creators of our lives. And what we're all here to do is to heal our lives. So going back to what this year's all about, there's a conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus that are coming together. And it will be April 20th that this conjunction occurs. And it happens every 14 years, so it's not unusual. But the last time that they came together in the latter part of Aries, So, it's like the signs we couldn't even trace it back. It was thousands of years.
Wow.
Okay. So this is a new beginning. Aries is all about new beginnings. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It's what gives birth, new awareness. So to put Jupiter magnifies everything. Jupiter is a planet of abundance. And what it does is it expands everything. And so Uranus, which is a slower moving planet, by the way, a lot of Vedic astrologers don't use the 3 outer planets. But because I started with Western astrology, I was a Western astrologer for 20 years and then reverted to Vedic, I found a way to incorporate the 3 outer planets.
Wow.
And what it is that they influence the planets they're next to. So the outer planets, their energy, the 3 outer planets are more transpersonal. They're not as personal as the planets that we can see with the naked eye. So between, including the sun and the moon in terms of the luminarities as planets, with the planets to Saturn, Saturn is the last planet that's visible to the naked eye. And those are the planets that are used exclusively in Vedic astrology. But in Western astrology, I knew they were the 3 outer planets. So I had to find a way where it didn't destroy the Vedic system. And the way that I discovered that they work is they influence the personal planets they're next to. So going to the prediction for this year, Jupiter's a personal planet. And Uranus next to it, they both expand each other, right? And Uranus is called the Great Awakener. And Uranus is actually a planet that rules astrology too. It deals with the future, it deals with invention, and it deals with electricity, energy, and Jupiter makes it bigger than ever. So we're going to have some of the most amazing discoveries this year. And of course, dealing with health and healing, there's going to be some amazing new discoveries and cures for many things that have plagued our society and world. But it's also, I think, because we're starting to look at health from the vantage point of the holistic health of the emotions and the spiritual. We can't have a healing unless we're looking at all of the facets, and including and especially the spiritual, because we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Absolutely, that's what we are.
Hey, did you know that you're walking around like a radio tower, just broadcasting out these messages and frequencies on a subconscious level? And some of those broadcasts are negative, and they could be affecting the way people see you, the way people treat you. Did you also know that you're never upset for the reason that you think you're upset? We're also walking around with these trapped emotions, trapped old traumas from things that have happened to us in our past. And that's what I clear for people when they come and work with me one-on-one. We look for the subconscious blocks that are affecting you, and I clear them. Most people report the next day, if not that same day, they feel lighter, they feel happier, they feel free. And a lot of times you can check out the testimonials on my website to see people resolve physical illnesses and physical traumas like restless leg syndrome, eye pressure problems, cold feet, cold hands, anxiety. All of these things are things that I've seen get cleared when people work with me. It's all done on an energetic level. And the best part is that it's done remotely from the comfort of your home. We just get on a Zoom call, and in 30 minutes, you can experience what feels like 10 years of therapy. So if you're curious, go to www.frankelaridi.com, and I cannot wait to work with you.
You can't take it any other way. So this is going to be a period of enlightenment. Now, of course, with the duality on the planet of the positive, negative, which is a part of the male, female, there's nothing wrong with it. But there's going to be other opposing forces that don't like what's opening. So that's why on planet Earth it will never be a utopia.
Yeah.
Never, because of the dualities. And that's okay. What we're here for is to grow and learn. And this is one of the more difficult dimensions or worlds to grow and learn from. But it's always an opportunity. We're all here with opportunities for growth, and growth where we get to open and realize why we're really here. And you know what astrology really is? Know thyself, right? If you know yourself, you know everything about the universe. Truly you do. Because what's above is so below. What's out there is within us. And you know, I love to tell this little scenario because this is a fact. You know, the chakras, the 7 chakras, are aligned with our solar system.
Wow.
So in other words, the root chakra is Saturn. And Saturn is the slowest moving planet. So the root chakra deals with, you know, fear, deals with our root, and deals with survival attitudes. That's the root chakra. But we have our own tiny solar systems within us. So what's the planet that comes after Saturn that is the next one in terms of slower moving? Jupiter. So we're going from Saturn, the way our planets are aligned in our solar system, and it goes up our chakra system.
Which one is the crown?
The crown, well, what is the fastest moving one? The moon. And the sun is the third eye.
Wow.
And Mercury is the throat chakra. It deals with communications. So if you look at it,
it's so perfect.
It's divinely perfect. Everything is in this universe. So, you know, we come to Jupiter after Saturn, and it deals with the reproductive system. In Vedic astrology, Jupiter rules children.
Exactly.
And Mars is the solar plexus. It's not the sun, because, you know, when you get punched in the solar plexus, you know, and that's where you feel when you get angry and motivated. It's right there. That's Mars. And then guess what Venus is? Love, relationships. That's the heart. Then Mercury's the throat. And then the sun, the moon. And then the outer planets deal with the collective unconscious and how we're all connected.
Wow.
And so this is the beauty of our universe. So when you actually look at your birth chart, depending on the planets, let's say you've got Mars, it's not in a good place. Well, then that means this chakra needs to be worked on.
That's so interesting. I've never heard of this whole as above, so below in that way.
Yes.
Or like as within, so without. I never thought of it in a planetary way.
It is.
Wow.
It is. It's like we have our own solar system within us. And, you know, and everything that is out there is within us. That's why when you know yourself, thyself, you really and truly know the mechanics and the working of the universe and the divine and why we're here. That's plagued me ever since I can remember.
Me too.
Why are we here? Why are we in these bodies? What's the purpose? And I'm sorry, but the religious doctrines didn't explain it to me, but astrology does.
What's really interesting with guests like you, and I've had this other person named Gaia on the show who's really incredible with helping people understand their soul purpose and soul progression. And I think that's what I love the most about astrology, about people like Gaia, is that it really gives you a sense of like, okay, I know I'm on the right track. I know I wasn't crazy thinking that this was what I was supposed to do, or whatever it is in your life, right? It's like confirmation.
Absolutely, it is. And when you feel that sense of knowing, confirmation is when you know. It's not when you hope, you wish, you pray, you know. And that knowingness is everything. And it manifests all that you're here to manifest in the world. Because let's face it, when you get rid of the self-doubt and any doubt, that's when things happen. Good things.
I want to ask about April 20th, because you said that's like a point, right? April 20th, 2024. But let me ask something specific.
Okay.
I launched this podcast on April 20th, 2023, this year.
Interesting.
And the really interesting thing is, of course, because I didn't know you yet, and first thing I do is call my astrologer, Jade, and I was like, Jade, when should I launch this podcast? And he was like, he said April. And I said, when specifically in April? And he said April 20th.
I know why he chose that date.
But you know what's crazy about that?
Tell
it
me.
was already the launch date. I had already had it set for April 20th.
All meant to be.
Okay, so why is it though? Why? Because you said you know why he said that.
Because
Why
Jupiter
April 20th?
changed signs. So, you know, Jupiter shifted from Pisces into Aries. And that was a new beginning. And you have all those Aries planets.
Right.
See? So Jupiter is the planet of abundance and wealth and opportunities. So of course you're going to launch it when Jupiter changes into your sun sign.
So now why April 20th, 2024 for everybody?
Because that's when the Jupiter and Uranus exactly conjunct. Now, we're going to get a feeling of all this way before that. And another thing is, it's the month of April is when we have the solar eclipse as well. See, eclipses are one of the best predictive tool we have in astrology, because it's a coming together of the nodal axes, Rahu and Ketu, with the sun and the moon. And so this is the time that everything comes to light, what that year is going to be about, in accordance to what sign it's occurring in. So these eclipses, they've just shifted. As a matter of fact, they shifted the 28th of November. They shifted into new signs. And so for a year and a half, Rahu and Ketu will be in a particular sign. And that's where the eclipses are. And so those energies change everything, okay? So for the next 18 months, now everything's going to be more about where Rahu and Ketu are. So April 20th, we have the big bang of Jupiter-Uranus, which is sort of like, wow, people start awakening.
Really?
Uranus is the great awakener. And Jupiter expands it. So now all of a sudden people are looking at the world through a different lens. And now we also have the nodes in a different sign. And they're there for the next year and a half. So Rahu just shifted into Pisces and Ketu just shifted into Virgo. And Virgo is the sign of health and healing. And Ketu is sort of like that draw into the mystical, the spiritual. And so people are going to start looking at healing from a different vantage point. So they're going to be looking to you for answers with your healing work. This is the timing of it all. And when I think about Pisces and Virgo, those particular signs are amazing, because when I think of Pisces, I think about compassion and healing. And when I think about Virgo, I think about health and getting things right, fixing things. Virgos are all about helping people, right? And Pisces is all about the compassion to help people. But another thing, you can go to the opposite ends, because you can look at something from a very positive standpoint or a negative standpoint, because we have that yin and yang. Yeah. We've got that duality. So looking at Pisces, it can be sort of like the victim, and suffering and victim. It's like, well, let's consider this. The whole Piscean age, what we're in right now, came about 2,000 years ago. And Pisces is the symbol of the fish, right? And that started the onset of all the churches, Catholicism, or Christianity, I should say. And all the churches were built. This started 2,000 years ago. So we're in the age of Pisces. You've heard we're going into the age of Aquarius. Well, this is all in accordance to the precessional cycle that I talked about earlier. Western astrology doesn't even look at the ages that are depicted because of precession. And because of precession, that's why we have the placements in sidereal Vedic astrology. So going back to Pisces, Virgo, I look at it as a time of maybe looking into religions and what religions are really meant to be about. Because when I think about religion, I think about what I grew up with, which isn't in reality my truth anymore. My truth is that we're here to discover who we really are, and that is that we're one with God. Call it whatever you want. The divine, the force, whatever. But we are part of that. And when we discover that, that opens the whole door to self-discovery and what we're capable of doing, and that we are here to create our own lives. We're not victims of circumstances anymore. We're open and aware of the possibilities of what we're capable of doing. Remember, I think it was in one of the, in the Bible somewhere, it says Jesus said, as he brought the man back from the dead, he said, see these things I do? You can do these things in greater, talking to humanity. And I believe that wholly and completely. And I think this is where we're starting to come around with the awareness of who and what we're really about, why we're here. And why we're here is to heal the whole dilemma of humanity, to wake up. And that's your job.
But I mean, hey, you too, though. Yes,
Right.
I'm helping with the healing on that level that you talked about, emotional, mental, clearing blocks that was stuck in the body. The body remembers, sometimes people
Right.
come to me with serious ailments and I'll go back to a certain year over and over and over. And I say,
Exactly.
what happened that year? And they're like, oh, that's the year my husband left me and I, moved and I left the house or whatever it is. And then when we clear that, their physical thing goes away and they're like, but I'm over that. Yeah, consciously you're over it. Your body has
Exactly.
not forgotten.
That's right. You nailed it, because it's held in the body. All those emotional issues that we think we're over, but they're still lodged somewhere
Yes.
in the body. That's where disease comes from.
Yeah. And people, with therapy is amazing to give you tools for like right now. I
Right.
know I'm dealing with this thing. How do I clear it? But people have gone through therapy sometimes for years, and then they'll come to me and they're like, I worked through that. And I'm like, you did on a conscious level. You understand it, you can
So
identify
true.
it, but you haven't cleared it from the body, from the system. You've just learned how to cope with it.
That's right. They know it, but
Yeah.
they haven't cleared it.
Yes.
Yes, that is so beautiful.
And you, though, with helping people understand our connection with where we come from and that divinity, because you're right, there's these beautiful nuggets in the Bible and in religion, like the quote you just said with Jesus saying, you can do it too. Somehow, religion has made it where we don't focus on those lines
I know.
that empower you. And
So true.
Right? And it's just more about separation rather than what you just said, this great awakening.
Exactly. So really, I don't really like to talk about in terms of Jesus. I like to talk about in terms of Christ consciousness.
Yes, same. Yeah.
Because what is that? That's the consciousness that the great saints of
Yes.
all religions know.
Which
The
Buddha, by the
truth.
way, too. I had this
And-
conversation with
yeah.
someone the other day, one of my clients who asked about what's the difference between Jesus and Christ consciousness. And then we got into Buddha, and he said, well, what about Buddha? And I reminded him, because I think people forget, Buddha is not his name. Buddha is what he became, Buddha consciousness. So anybody who
Yeah.
reaches that level is a Buddha.
Right.
In that religion, in that practice. But
And
his
that's
name
what
was
we're all here to
gotten him up.
do.
Yeah.
We're all
yeah.
here to find that Christ consciousness,
Yeah.
or that consciousness that you are the divine.
So does that mean this age, 2024, is close to repeating what all those awakenings that happened in the times of those prophets and what we're reading now as religion?
Oh, well, I hope, but
I hope so
we
too.
got a long ways to go. In the whole processional cycle, here's how it works. There is a time when we will come to more enlightenment on this planet. But 2,000 years ago was the very darkest time in humanity.
Is that Kali Yuga?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And so we're just, remember I told you the whole cycle's 26,000 years. And it's a circular cycle. So 2,000 years ago, we were at the darkest. So we're only 2,000 years into this cycle, which the halfway mark would be around 13,000 years, okay? And so we're only 2,000 into this towards the highest point. So in other words, it's kind of depressing, but we have over 10,000 years to go.
But see, I look at it more positively, I think, because
But in the terms of
because it's
the
getting better and
processional,
better and better and
it
better and
is.
better, right? So
It
it's
is.
and even, don't they say, because probably the exact length of each one, but Kali Yuga, for example, is way shorter than
Right.
the phase of enlightenment. That
Yes.
lasts 7,000 years. So they're not all
Exactly.
the same amount.
That's true. But I'm just saying, when they say we come to the ultimate phase of enlightenment.
10
but
more.
then again, all of us have that opportunity right now. It's not like we can't achieve that. It's just that the collective consciousness
For
will
all
be,
of humanity.
Exactly.
Got
yes.
it. That
But
makes
we
sense.
all have that. And through all the divine tools that we have for self-awareness and awakening, that's how we do it. And I do believe, yes, there's going to be more consciousness and people coming around this year because of that conjunction. And so, but you know, there's some other things that I went back. The last time that Jupiter was, well, not the very last time, but the time that we put a man on the moon. And I believe it was August of 1969, around that time. Jupiter and Uranus were exactly conjunct, the same degree. So I'm saying they're in a different sign this time, which is actually even more progressive to be in Aries. They were in Virgo before, but this is going to bring space realizations.
Wow.
And of course, you and I are on the same mindset when it comes to aliens and all of that. I mean, it's been pretty much out there that it's for real. People will believe it if they want. If they don't want to believe it, even with facts, they...
Right.
You know?
Right. Even with now, finally, the government's like, okay, it's real. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's real.
But it can be scary for people I get it. But I mean, Dr. Stephen Greer
Yes.
was on my show, and it is the by far most watched episode. I got my, annual stats from Spotify, and it's like 300% more or something.
Right.
People are really interested in aliens.
And they should
and
be.
And what's out there.
I believe that, now I could be wrong, but it just makes sense to me that they're here to help us.
Yeah.
Because they could have gotten rid of us a long time ago.
Easy.
You know? And at our level of awareness, where we're still using atomic energy and fighting wars and killing one another, they're kind of like, we're not going to let them know exactly that we're here yet because their level of consciousness. But we got to help them somehow, especially when we start. When we started using atomic energies, when they came flooding in.
It created a ripple in the universe.
Yes.
Like you can actually measure it.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had to somehow, alter things and help because, the ignorance here, we'd just be destroying one another. We are destroying one another with war. It's insane to me that another human being would kill another human being. It's just we're in a low level of consciousness in this age. But when we do get to the age of Aquarius, which is
when, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, all right. So right now we're around 6 degrees of Pisces in the zodiac. So if you consider we have 6 degrees to go to get to the left, because it travels backwards in the zodiac, by the way. So 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 29 degrees Aquarius. That's when we enter in. So each degree equates to 72 years. So 72 times 6.
We're that far away from the Aquarian age? 72 times 6? So about
Yes.
500 years or something?
Yeah, 430 or something.
I
yeah.
thought it was like 70 years away.
I wish. But the closer we get, the more we feel it.
Right.
We are getting there.
Even year by year, do we feel it?
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Absolutely. So it all, we're getting closer to the age of Aquarius where, I always say this, the saying for Pisces is I believe, because it deals with religion and building of churches, and it's like I believe, the belief factor. But to me, belief isn't, you're not there yet. I know.
And embody.
Yes. And that's the same for Aquarius. I know. Where Pisces is I believe. So we come from that belief to the knowing.
Oh, we're so close.
I know.
Because we talked about the positive, the healing, the awakening that's coming. Is there anything explosive that people need to look out for in 2024?
Yes. Well, we are still in a predicament where there's a lot of fighting and therefore wars that will still go on. And we have got in the United States the political stuff that's happening. And what I feel is going to be happening is there's a whole trend. Now let me explain something that people need to know. Everything with the vibrational frequency that's happening right now has already set everything in motion. So it's almost like the future is there already, okay? And people think, oh, if I do this, but pretty much with the feeling of where everything has been coming from, it's already set into motion. And so, you know, everyone wants to know the politics, which of course politics to me is, I don't know, it's dirty. It's not, you know, it's a bunch of very ambitious, driven, and you know, you got to realize this, that the people who lead countries, they're all pretty corrupt. I mean, I hate to say that, but, and the more powerful the country, probably the more corrupt, okay? Because that's along the lines of power. But all of us, we're hoping for a savior, right? Who can save us from what we've been going through? We want somebody in politics that could come along and save us.
Yeah.
But it's not going to work like that because there's been so much of the swing this way, so the swing is going to go that way. But I will say this, by the time of 2026, that it will equal out a lot. And I actually see a golden age coming for the United States around 2026, 2027. And I use this particular birth chart for the United States to make my predictions. And that will be when Jupiter's in Gemini. It's going to be going over all the planets in the United States chart, which is around 2026, and that will be such a healing.
Wow.
But to get there, we're going to go to the polar opposite from where we are right now. Okay. That's what's going to happen. And you can see it's all happening. And everyone is speaking with anger and frustration and rage. And what happens is it creates more dysfunction and war and fighting in the world. And a lot of things that have been repressed for so long, such as anger and you know, the dark side of things, it has to surface in order to be healed. And that's what's been happening right now. Everything's kind of coming up, so we're going, oh, that's what's been festering like a cancer growing when it comes. And then you see, okay, that's what needs to be worked on and healed. But it's not easy, and a lot of people suffer through all of this. A lot of suffering. So, so this coming year, yes, we're still going to have a lot of war. But by the time we come to the end of the year, and this is based on the chart I use for the United States.
And to be clear for people, end of 2024.
Yes, the end of 2024. That's where there's going to be this outrage. And I'll go ahead and tell you astrologically why I'm saying this, because I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. I'm not a psychic. Okay, so when planets go retrograde, that means when the planet is actually closest to the Earth. And, you know, in a retrograde process, everyone hears about Mercury retrograde, right? You know, Mercury retrograde. And it's really in the cycle where we're all going around the sun. And at one point, the Earth kind of passes Mercury. So it appears to go backwards, but of course it really doesn't. But at that point in time, when a planet is retrograde, on all accounts, it's closest to the Earth. That's why when a planet goes retrograde, you'll see it like when Venus goes retrograde. It's huge because it's closer to the Earth. But the retrograde process means that whatever that planet's about, you better look at it and work on it. It's like it becomes the matter that needs to be attended to, okay, attention to. So Mars goes retrograde about every 2 years, so it's not uncommon. But the particular place that it's going to go retrograde is going to be where it affects the United States. All those planets in Gemini. Mars is going to go retrograde. First, when a planet goes retrograde, it slows down, and stops, and then it changes direction. And by the fact that it's changing direction means it's stopped before it goes from forward to backwards or backwards to forwards. So we call that a stationary planet. And that means that planet, everything it's about. And if it sits on any of your natal planets in your chart, it will be a huge big deal. So I look at the stations of planets as monumental in my predictions. And so Mars is going to be stationing. Well, first it's going to station in Cancer, which is its worst sign to be in.
Worst?
Yes,
Okay.
it's very worst. It's called its debilitation sign. And for the United States chart, it's going to be in the 8th house, and that means corruption is revealed. The 8th house is corruption and things you can't see, and money, big money, government money. So the corruption, and this isn't just for the United States, actually, it's everywhere.
And when is that?
But this is going to be around December of 2024.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
And so my point is, it's right after the elections, which means whoever comes into office, there is a big uproar over it.
Right, because even though it's in November, you actually don't it really all happens in December, January.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And then by January or February, Mars stations exactly on the sun of the United States chart. And the sun is the president in a chart.
Oh, the leader, the father figure.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it's going to be 22 degrees of Gemini. That's where Mars stations. And that is where the sun for the United States. I mean, the whole...
So what does that mean?
All the 360 degrees of the zodiac, that degree. Well, here's another thing. All right, so I'm going to get really real with you here.
Yes, please. Yes.
Going back, what I do as an astrologer, you go back to look at planetary cycles, what they produced before, such as when these planets were in these signs before, when Rahu and Ketu were in Pisces and Virgo. What happened? And one of the times that they came together, Rahu came together with Saturn in Pisces, was 1968. Okay?
Okay.
Think back to 1968. 1968 was the year that we had the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy.
Wow.
Yes. Or Bobby Kennedy. Okay. So it deals with assassinations. Now we're dealing with Mars on the sun, which is another indicator of violence to a president or a leader worldwide, but mainly in the United States because this is the sun. And then we have the nodal axes in the positions that we had assassinations before. So this is actually the end of 2024, but into 2025 that I see this. And it's because of the, whoever gets in as president, you have half of the country angry. And here's another very interesting thing, and I'm going to be talking about this, is there's something called the eclipse paths. So what is an eclipse path? Where the eclipse is most visible on planet Earth. So wherever that path is going to be more where things break out on the planet. And so I'm looking at the eclipse, and these eclipses are happening in Virgo, Pisces this year. It happens early April, the first solar eclipse, goes right over Texas and right across the United States. Usually they're not right smack dab over the United States, right? It almost seems like a split of the United States.
Wow.
But the
because
reason,
Texas is in the middle, yeah.
Yes, but the reason why I'm pointing out Texas is because in October, when we have the second solar eclipse in 2024, the other eclipse path, they make an X right through Texas. So something's up, and it's right there where the border is, pretty much. So there's something about the border and people coming across that's relative to what is going to happen in the United States based on these eclipse paths and where the eclipses are in Virgo, Pisces, as well as this Mars is very indicative of the leadership in the United States. There will be violence because of it. Lots of violence. So does that kind of explain? Do you have any questions about how this all works?
So interesting to see how you go from what's happening in December, right, with the people,
the Mars,
yes, and
retrograde,
and things being revealed and corruption coming to the surface, people being angry, then to go from that into January, February, it lines up with what happened with Bobby Kennedy and with Martin Luther King. And then it all kind of makes sense with what is happening on a political level at that time here too.
Right.
So it's interesting to see that kind of correlation.
Yes.
Wow.
It is. But as an astrologer, you got to try to say, let's stay to the facts. Let's not go to our opinions, because let's base it. We're all people and we all have our biases. I know astrologers always say you can't be biased. Everyone's biased in some way, no matter how you try.
I come from journalism, and it's like you can never not be fully biased or unbiased. Sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You try.
You try. It's like you're always your effort, but
So, I'm not talking in terms, but I'll tell you what, I do, because everyone wants to know, I do go into the charts of who's the president, who's running, and who I think is going to win, but I'm not going to tell you today.
So that's on December 9th.
Yeah.
I need to get this episode out before then.
I know.
I think I have it set for end of December.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I've listened to a lot of astrologers, and we're all in agreement this time.
Really?
Mm-hmm. We're all in agreement. And I know that I know where most of the astrologers, if they're liberal or not liberal, both sides are saying the same thing.
But you know what's interesting about all this is it goes back to what you said earlier, which is for some people, 2024, 2025 will be shocking. It'll be hard to digest.
Yes.
And for others, you, me, a lot of the listeners probably who have really done the work and are delving into this will not be shocked and will be like, thank you, finally people are talking about this.
You nailed it. That you put it exactly, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what it's going to be like. So I'm excited.
Me too. I'm so excited.
Yes.
Because it's like finally change, new.
Yes. It's always a blessing in disguise,
Yes.
things that we don't like.
Yeah.
They're always blessings in disguise. And we have to gear our mind to think like that, because then we look at everything as an opportunity for growth, because that's what it is.
The most important thing people can do in 2024 is probably start their own spiritual practice, something, right, to root themselves. And I would say go to you or to someone like you, right, to really understand, because 2024 is so massive, and it's not just you saying this, like gurus and yogis and shamans from every tradition are like, guys, 2024 and 2027.
Yeah.
But 2020 was a big one, 2024. And I think to go to you and know, how will this personally affect me? Because you're giving a reading, right, of course, of like how it affects the whole world, what's happening. But every single person will have a different path within that.
Absolutely. Have a whole different experience based on their individual birth chart.
Which, by the way, don't you have mine?
Yes.
Should we do this in mine or in yours, where we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we can look at yours. Absolutely.
Can we do that?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay. Are you okay with that?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay.
Do you have it? Do you need to go get it, or do you have it in front of you? Oh, you have it. Okay. Good. A bonus part 2 of this video where Joni reads my astrological chart will be released tomorrow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.